Esteemed listeners, welcome to the third session of my open address to the Yoruba people of the homeland and diaspora on Oduduwa in the light of metaphorical history of nature. Reiteratively speaking, this presentation is in pursuit of exploring the scientific utility of the name Oduduwa in Yoruba mythology beyond limitations to ancestry, Isese tradition, and the naming of a sovereign country. In the first two sessions, we have discussed interpretations of Oduduwa in relation to subjects in physical sciences, and the call was made to the Yoruba to pursue philosophical development to the point where they will be able to contribute to the world regeneratively in the 21st century and also be impactful on the improvement and growth of knowledge and the improvement of mankind in general. Let us now proceed with this third session to discuss Oduduwa as a symbol of human physiology, sexuality, and reproductive science. Oduduwa snail as a symbol of sexuality and reproduction. We have posited earlier on in the course of discussion about the chemistry template which the snail presents. We learned from Abrahamic religious legends that the earth is the original component of human flesh by a position that man was made from dust. The Yoruba worldview presents an original base of dust in the primeval snail shell of Orunmila on one hand and Oduduwa on another. It is important to note that the snails are from Olodumare's domains. The Oduduwa legend is replete with great scientific prospects, cutting across multiple fields of scientific interest. In the Yoruba legend of creation, where Oduduwa was referred to as Orisanla's younger brother, the chance philosophic limitation is radically broken by a review on the template of metaphorical history of nature. In this regard, Orisanla is viewed as a male symbol while Oduduwa is viewed as a female, by transcendence into the use of distinctive deific identity of Odu in Ofumiji. Orisanla's contact with the snail at the onset of a journey to create the world, and the eventual completion of the work after Orisanla slept off due to being drunk from drinking palm wine, is an embodiment of rich sexual imageries and symbolisms. Generally, Orisanla is a deific symbolic representation of the male man that is expected to be of the purest possible ethical character on earth, a purity symbolized by whiteness of apparel. He, like man, which he symbolizes in nature, holds a share of pure human generation, which is impossible without the snail. Note, Ashe is like authority. Alright, okay, yeah. Now, the snail in Ifa worldview is referred to as a womb of nature. What is thus indicated is a generative character in the feminine dimension. In relation to human construct, the exterior of the snail flesh is of similar character to the external form of the female genitalia, labia majora and labia minora, which may be termed as the gate or door on the female body of a pathway to the womb. In Yoruba language, that pathway, which is concealed or hidden, may be called Ọ̀nà tí a bò lára obìnrin, or plainly stated, Obo obìnrin. It is a fact that the snail's sensitive antennae hide under a hood like the sensitive female clitoris, called Ido in Yoruba, is characteristically hooded. In further metaphorical historical interpretation, Orisanla, the man, is interpreted to have engaged the female vagina in sexual intercourse. The palm wine which he drank symbolizes inducement of sexual drive by contact with the female sensual essence. This is a condition precedent to intoxication, which may herein be deemed to be a psychological condition in which, in its own right, is akin to human precoital peaks of sexual arousal. Intoxication by palm wine occurs only by consumption of fermented portions. Fresh palm wine, derived directly from the trees, tastes very sweet and does not intoxicate. When fermentation sets in, the volume of alcohol in the in the palm wine increases and the taste changes from sugar sweet to being tangy. Hence, by taste sensory indication, Orisanla's engagement with female vagina is further suggested in sensory symbolism by a similitude of the tangy taste of the fermented palm wine with the common tangy taste of the vagina. Intoxication also suggests excessiveness. Hence, we may arrive at a further presumption of Orisanla's engagement in multiple rounds of sexual intercourse. Naturally, after great sexual encounters, very sound and deep sleep is induced. It is therefore presumed that Orisanla slept off on his assignment of creation after sexual intercourse and was detached from any further process of creation as a result. Just as man is detached from the woman physically after sex, leaving the woman to carry the remaining burden of delivery of species, Oduduwa, as a female entity, even though referred to as brother to Orisanla, carried on with the burden of procreation by a hold to the snail symbol as a vagina and womb unto delivery. In cases of birth defects, for which Orisanla is blamed as a result of intoxication with alcohol and alcoholic hangover, perhaps the scientific value is in the examination of the role of excessive alcohol in the male or female bodies and root fertilization in the reproductive process. For those who do not indulge in alcohol and who produce children with defects, the essential minerals or hormones that are affected in one way or another at intoxication may be the right objects of focus as the biological basis of male-female hormonal conditions, balance or imbalance, prior to copulation or post-copulation. Alcoholic toxicity may also be deemed to be an indicator that toxins generally may put fetuses at risk. There's this issue about Yoruba worldview. There's a capacity for androgynous interpretations, where at times some deities will say some male, female, and that is one of those that have played out in the essence of Oduduwa Oduduwa precisely, and there are some others too that are like that. In some traditions, they say Olokun is male, of course, particularly in the Edo Benin side. In this area, Olokun is female. Now back to our discussion. We now speak of this brief commentary. Reiteratively speaking, the scientific interpretation of Oduduwa indicates a need for the Yoruba to diligently seek knowledge and an understanding of their worldview in such a manner as to make overtures towards better utilization of cultural heritage in the course of 21st century civilization. The pantheon of Orisha contains deep philosophical and exciting scientific possibilities which have been demonstrated by the Oduduwa interpretative example. It must primarily be understood that Orisha does not mean idol, as it is violently misrepresented by the Abrahamic faiths in relation to indigenous Yoruba worldview. Orisha are nature forces on one hand, and distinctly conscious beings referred to as Eni Orishada on the other. When we view Oduduwa and the Yoruba Orisha pantheon in the light of physical sciences, the quest for knowledge of our environment and understanding of the universe through symbolic presentations and indications in Ifa mythology moves us, the Yoruba, towards overcoming limitations to understanding ourselves, our environment, and our universe. It puts us in a position where we can significantly contribute to discourse on the universe and man, and also to modern science at the highest possible levels. However, it is our primary task to know and understand our limitations in respect of knowledge of ourselves and indigenous cultural worldview. The limitation is found to be connected to a reliance on cultural myths in a static condition of chance philosophy, which, when it does not evolve in time, becomes obsolete in application, and dysfunctional in the human development spectrum. I would like to explore an explanation of this limitation from the position of Francis Bacon, a former Lord Chancellor of Great Britain and foremost British empiricist philosopher, whose works contributed to developing scientific method and which was very influential in the scientific revolution in Europe. The particular limitation from the Baconian perspective is the idol of the tribe. This is one of four idols, the rest being of the cave, marketplace, and theatre, which he identified as forces that set limitation to the human mind. For the Yoruba, scholarship is tasked to evolve methods of interpreting our ancestors' knowledge and perception of the world in whatever forms they have expressed it on records, oral, sculpt, carving, painting, or writing. As a matter of fact, the issue of applying right methods in pursuit of the knowledge of our real world has been suggested to be a most important aim of philosophy. We, Yoruba, do ourselves and the world grievous harm when we rely exclusively on Western and Eastern methods of interpreting the universe. We must necessarily cultivate and evolve our own, holding on firmly to the best of the West and East for complementary purposes and for consolidating indigenous Yoruba cultural interpretative originality where necessary. In respect of the stated aim of philosophy, M. Akinola Makinde, one of the foremost exponents of African philosophy in his lifetime, in a paper titled Of Chance Philosophy and Obsolete Philosophy, Some Anti-Scientific Features of African Traditional Thought, wrote, and I quote, "It has been suggested that the most important aim of philosophy is the search for a right method that can be employed to find a secure foundation for our knowledge of the real world." He further noted that the aim has been noted to have led to Francis Bacon's inductive methods. To Bacon, man had sought for truth by various means, the sciences, reason, philosophical and theological theorizing, but had failed to see that such attempts were doomed by the very nature of the case unless new methods could be found for overcoming the innate obstacles that stood in man's way. These innate obstacles are generally referred to as Bacon's idols, which, according to him, distort our knowledge of the nature of things. With regard to the above stated aim of philosophy, and in respect of the Yoruba problem of interpretative limitation that has deprived the race and mankind of significant contributions to the foundation blocks for the knowledge of the real world from the Oduduwa worldview, the lead problematic idol, which is also a culprit in the crisis of religious dogma-induced barricade to optimum human cognitive function, is identified as that of the tribe. According to Francis Bacon, idols of the tribe have their foundation in human nature itself, and in the tribe and race of men, for it is a false assertion that the sense of man is the measure of things. On the contrary, all perceptions, as well of the sense of the mind, are according to the measure of the universe, and the human understanding is like a false mirror, which, receiving rays irregularly, distorts and discolors the nature of things by the mingling of its own nature with it. In view of the above stated position, the task to contribute to achieving the aim of philosophy from the Yoruba indigenous world view in Ifa and Orisha phenomenon requires departure from the lounge of cultural inertia. It thus becomes imperative that the new methods of interpreting Yoruba worldview are derived. The path to new derivations in pursuit of scientific and philosophical development from indigenous cultural worldview. A path was suggested by Makinde in his work that was referred to earlier, wherein he opined that by means of critical reflection on our well-entrenched dogmas, chance philosophy and obsolete philosophy will surely give way to critical philosophy, and critical philosophy, the development of of human scientific intelligence and consequently to the advancement and improvement of society and mankind. The contemporary Yoruba, instead of getting trapped in the limitations of chance philosophy, which is found in cultural and religious myths, and in order to avoid the consequence of such trappings or entrapments in the figuring out to being obsolete in presentation of worldview, must necessarily reassess who they are as a deem from indigenous cultural history and legends, and thereafter progress by direct involvement in impactful philosophizing for the improvement of knowledge in philosophical, scientific, and social discourse globally. It is within this aforementioned entrapment that the late sage Obafemi Awolowo was limited in his quest to establish a scientific inquiry into Yoruba tradition for technological development, as it can be found in an article titled Making Use of Juju. Obafemi Awolowo suggests useful fields of inquiry. The said article was published in the West African Review, Liverpool, England, in the year 1939. Awolowo did not proceed from the ground norm of Yoruba cultural worldview in the Oduduwa, but from the magical manifestations that are characteristically devoid of theoretical and conceptual development base and prospects. This is no failing on the part of the legendary sage, but a successful suggestion of a prospective course of scientific and technological endeavor through indigenous cultural phenomena. It is more gladdening that younger members of Awolowo's generation took over the baton by bringing discourse on Ifa into the public intellectual domain, locally and internationally. In the late 20th century, 5 prominent members of this generation are Professor Wole Soyinka, Awishe Professor Wande Abimbola, Akinola Ayodele Akiwowo, Akinola Makinde, and Sophie Oluwole. Of this generation of professors, Awishe, Wande Abimbola, and Wole Soyinka are currently alive. This generation is also succeeded by another generation of scholars like Professor Kola Abimbola, the late Moses Oke, etc. No doubt, it is a necessary task of the 21st century Yoruba intellectual order to pay concentrated attention to cultivating the best potentials from the ground norm of Yoruba culture, which is the Oduduwa corpus, and explore the best possible interpretation of the Orisha phenomenon. At this juncture, having stated issues concerning limitations to attaining true knowledge of the universe in the light of Francis Bacon's Idol of the Tribe, it is essential to delve into interpretations of a mythical indicator of the course of limitations to human understanding of mythology generally, and Oduduwa particularly, for the purpose of this address. This interpretation also indicates a path to regenerative understanding from the perspective of Oduduwa. The stated interpretation derives from a mythical Ifa perception of the current speaker, wherein the harmony of Oduduwa with Olokun and Orunmila through conflict resolution for regeneration was unveiled in transcendental perception or transcendental experience. This will be discussed briefly under the next heading in the 4th session. At this juncture, we take a break.